So, hello, good evening. Kraig Smyth here, MyBizGuide, Business of Being Human, your friendly neighborhood wellness advocate, outdoor guide for your inner journey, and business consultant for the business of being you. Like all those, trying them out. So, Narcissism EDU series review. Yeah, just the last it was 7 workshops. Scarcity Mindset, Narcissist in the Mirror, Addiction, Misogyny, Racism, Colonialism, Capitalism. Well, with all those, there sure was a lot to go over, and I just thought it would be good to do another thorough overview and talk about how all those topics intersect, which I think we did a lot of anyways. But I just wanted to review that and how we can use the information, how we can go back and see what all this information is gonna give us, how it's gonna help us continue on with our daily lives. When I first started this series, I started with the Narcissist in the Mirror, and I just put a Facebook post out saying, hey, if I did a workshop called the Narcissist in the Mirror, would anybody be interested? And I actually got a lot of action off that. So that ended up being the second one that I did. But I think that's a real important one because where we are perpetuating negative habits in contemporary society is a big key. And if we talk about narcissism in general, it's the place to blame. It's the place to blame aspect. And to understand how immersed society is in this is really important, and the collective and the societal reflections of the individual. And the whole narcissism thing is such a hot topic. And in my opinion, it's a term that's just thrown around so arbitrarily. And it seems like, oh, yeah, everyone's calling everyone a narcissist. And that's not the best way to go. But to look at it from a bigger perspective, it might not be entirely inaccurate either, right? Because if it's a narcissistic society, if colonialism is basically the societal reflection of narcissism, and everyone, like literally everyone, okay, 99% of people say they've been in a relationship with narcissist, they know narcissist, they're close to narcissist, everyone's got that experience. So it's not just the white elephant. It's not just a rare occasion that you meet someone that's you feel is really off base and really not conducive to positive development, to use that concept. So if we're in a society and understand habitat and how habitat works, and always lessons from contemporary science that you don't understand an organism unless you understand the environment in which it developed in, because the environment shapes the organism. So if we're in a toxic environment, likely we're going to be perpetuating toxic traits too. Generational trauma, and I think we know this part of it too, where people are perpetuating the negativity from households, talking about smaller groups and individuals. The classic examples that people grow up in an unhealthy environment and they're just perpetuating those traits and replicating that unhealthy habitat, and mostly because that's all they know. And then it takes that real intention to get out of that and to break those negative cycles. And big lessons from addiction. There's the addiction component there too. So understanding where all these things fit together, I'm hoping will help people not chase our tails around saying, oh, there's a narcissist and here's capitalism and here's racism and here's addiction all over here, but to understand that it's really gets down to the core of the individual and what's the individual doing. And to look at that, the blame component, there's a real big propensity for people in contemporary society to look at their problems from an external view and sort of mirror the colonial system, colonialism again. Here's a part we don't talk to is how being in the system of external management, right? Mandating laws. Can we really make a law that's going to mandate wellness? We can't. But when people start talking about making change, a lot of people are looking at it from that lens, from what are we going to do? How are we going to adjust the system so that all these bad things aren't happening? But that's not our own volition. That's the external management. And again, and it's the blame. And this is what I'm saying is that's another part of the blame, to put that off onto something else. Because really, if we dig deep into the psychological profile, what's the part where people are just getting out of their own ecosystem? Because if I can blame the government, if I can say, oh, well, it needs to go through legislation to mandate wellness, that's really putting it out of my hands. And how much are people looking at that? Which overall, this is the consciousness aspect. Are we thinking about how we're thinking? Are we thinking about what we're thinking about? Are we using the objective thought process to really look at our challenges? And if we do that, if we can see these places, if we can see within ourselves, oh yeah, that's the blame thing, which is below that, the foundation of it is the anxiousness and the scarcity mindset. So to understand human behavior and these contemporary psychological terms and common terms is just a critical thing for all of us to grow with, to grow that core understanding of these concepts and where they all fit together. The scarcity mindset and the anxiousness, I think really that's the core of it. And if we talk about putting our blame out, if we talk about displacing our responsibilities, that comes from a fear-based mentality, right? That's somewhere we're not confident that we have the ability to field this. So we want to get it off our plate. Because if we have confidence, then we're like, yeah, give me the challenge and embrace it. And so if we don't have confidence in society's ability to heal itself and to grow or regrow into a society that has that capacity and that has the capacity to understand ourselves and look inward, what do we have? So there's a part that transcending that anxiousness and growing our confidence is a key. And the scarcity mindset, understanding that core component of scarcity mindset, and I'm going to go back over that in a minute, because the scarcity mindset, the anxiousness, the addiction, where those things come together are all part of the voids that we're missing. And the big part of the void that we're missing is that internal reflection. And narcissism, classic hallmarks of narcissist, is not doing that internal reflection, not doing that growth, not having a good relationship with themselves. So if narcissist doesn't have a good relationship with themselves, the reflection, the projection is that it's not a good relationship for other people. So other people that are in their personal develop are on our personal development journey, it's not a good relationship. It's not a healthy relationship. And I always say the reason you can't talk to a narcissist is because they can't talk to themselves, or because they don't talk to themselves, rather. Can't, don't, won't, combination of all those things, right? If we look at narcissism and addiction, those things are so close together. And if we look at the narcissist as an addict, I think that we're going to be closer to understanding the challenges. Is when we say, well, does the addict, are they really in control of themselves? Do they really have a handle on themselves? It's like, yeah, it's sort of, not so much. It's a grayscale. So we're asking narcissist, one of the scenarios is that asking a narcissist to give emotional support when they don't have the capacity for that. Understanding when someone doesn't have the capacity for something, and including ourselves, right? That comes with our own self, that comes with our own wellness, and understanding our own carrying capacity and our own boundaries when we're working with things like this. Even if we're thinking about things like this, you might not watch this Zoom and then go straight on to a 3-hour Gabor Mate video. You may have had enough after this. Or maybe you already watched a 3-hour Gabor Mate video and you're running low now. But that's carrying capacity. So understanding when we're working with each other, let's model that. And again, here's the reflections of narcissism, to use this common term that we're really is a big kind of catch-all. It's like the catch-all drawer. They don't understand that carrying capacity, and surely not the emotional carrying capacity aspect. And if we look at that societal reflection, contemporary society, colonialism, big governments, they horribly lack the understanding of, like, emotion is a quintessential part of being human. And I say that, the big governments, colonial societies, they don't understand human habit or habitat. So the natural environment that the species, aka the humans, developed in, or our inner habitat and our inner inclinations as human specific species. So the scarcity mindset, let's look at that for a foundational understanding of basically everything, because I'm going to submit that if we understand that, we're going to be on the right track to real healing. There's naturally occurring growth mechanisms on this planet, right? Challenge is a huge part of that. And if we understand that, and we could go into some of the natural laws, I think challenge is a real easy one to understand. But if we again, here's the understanding our environment part, and the part that I'm going to repeat, that we don't understand the species unless we understand the environment that it evolved in. Well, if we understand real nature, real environment, and we talk about natural laws like challenge, and challenge makes things strong, but also ebb flow, cycles, interconnectivity, the connection to everything, the drive for sustainability. If you think about all life forms, they all work into these things. And so if we look at the other life forms and their life cycles and all the forces that affect them, we can start to understand our own species better. So it's not just understanding an organism, it's the look in the mirror part. The classic is I talk about hatchery fish versus wild fish. Big issue here in the Pacific Northwest. The wild fish and all wild non-domesticated organisms, right? So make a little placeholder there. All the non-domesticated organisms have eons and eons of evolution behind them to shape them and to shape their strength and to shape their adaptability in their environment. And that is a really important thing to understand. Really super important thing to understand. So when we take an organism off of its evolutionary trajectory, the first thing we do is eliminate those natural challenges. When we take a fish out of its natural habitat, if we say, oh, instead of these fish repopulating naturally in the wild, we're going to put them in a giant tank and feed them. Well, you just eliminated huge aspects of challenge that really are needed in a natural ecosystem for the species to survive. And that's a known thing, is when we have hatchery fish, they don't do as well in the wild. When we have nursery plants, same thing. They don't do as well in the wild. They haven't gone through that natural selection process where a lot of them don't make it. But that is part of the process that keeps the entire species healthy. So there's some just critical things to understand about life on this planet first, and then look at the species. So there's some examples of external factors of challenge. And what about internal factors of challenge? Because I think that introspect is an instinctual aspect to humanity. And we're so different than everything else, every other organism. And to understand our inner workings, that's talking about natural human habit. When I said not understanding human habitat or habit, I think that the introspect is a naturally occurring human habit. And with that, to say there's naturally occurring challenges externally, there's naturally occurring challenges internally, and especially in our psyche. The naturally occurring frailties, if you will, growth mechanisms, the things that give us insecurity or pause about our own competency are things that are intrinsic to our growth. And this is a key component. So to restate, this is what I'm submitting, that there's naturally occurring challenges that are in the form of our insecurities. So when we feel ourselves not being adept at XYZ, the healthy, natural thing is to face that insecurity and work with it and grow it and grow ourselves, right? Classic example, jealousy. We feel ourselves being jealous, especially when we're younger. And if we go through the process, we say, oh, well, that's really not super healthy. But it takes work. It takes that part of transcending anxiety and keeping anxiousness at bay and going through the thought process and reasoning with ourselves and saying, look, this isn't healthy. Here's why, here's why, here's why, here's why. And really engaging ourselves and to say, oh, you know what? This ideology I picked up when I was younger isn't working for me. Let's say paper religion. And then it takes a while for us to really undo that. And when we feel that uncomfortableness, that's a naturally occurring idiot light, if you will, to say something's wrong. And the uncomfortableness, if we pay attention, then, oh, okay, yeah, something's wrong. But it's just making us pay attention. So our anxiousness is really a huge growth tool to show us where to look. But if a human would ignore that feeling and kind of do this is going to be a faux pas, so you guys that know me, we'll come back to this. The ostrich with its head in the sand, to ignore and go, oh, I can't feel like I can't have this feeling of insecurity, right? That is the foundation of cognitive dissonance. And I think that is the core of that concept of cognitive dissonance. Because if we can ignore our own feelings, then yeah, you can ignore anything else. And again, I think hallmarks of narcissism is that the lack of ability to receive information. Side note, that reception and the misogyny go together. Of course, with the feminine and the receptivity, which directly affects our intellect on that level. So we've got naturally occurring insecurities throughout our life. There's things that we feel about ourselves that we just don't feel right about ourselves. And that's great. That's just nature's way of letting us know that there's something that we need to work on. It's that little buzzing. It's like the door is open. It's like the door is ajar. And so to understand that part alone, I think is a key component, because the transcending anxiety, knowing the place of anxiety, knowing this whole aspect is key. And to have a good relationship with our natural challenges, with these naturally occurring growth stimulators, with these cues that we get. When we feel anxiousness, when we feel insecurity, that's the time to look and work with it. And this is the part when people say do the work. This is the part where the work occurs. If we are perpetuating habits that don't really fit into wellness, and we need to kick them back out again. And I'll go into the colonialism part here, because it's just super easy. And I hope someday, and hopefully someday sooner rather than later, I think this is a good time to talk about it, actually. You know, people say America, people say, no, this isn't what America is. And it's like, yeah, it is really. If we look at the history of colonialism, it's built on conquering. It's built on conquering and killing. All of the world's big governments, they're not in place because their neighbors saw that they were doing super good about nurturing healthy communities. They're there because they took over. So it's a conquering, killing mentality, which is not the working together mentality, and it's not the human nature mentality, because humans by nature work together. And that's the only reason that humans got this far. So just want to address that little false narrative that gets perpetuated around when people say, oh, well, it's survival of the fittest and it's human nature. I said, no, it's not. Survival of the fittest for humans is intellect, and intellect says you better get along or your life's going to be shit. So just to quash that really quick. So when people are relating in our mental habitat, what are some of the things that we relate to? Printed currency, written law, clock time. Well, they're all inanimate objects, and they're all not reflecting natural processes. And when we talk about wellness, again, there is no law that can be written that's going to mandate understanding our psyche and our human habit. I will submit that that mandatory behavior style laws miss that huge point right off the bat. And that's why there's laws, because people don't understand the process of having a cohesive community, and that people being on the same page through their own volition. You know, we know mandated behavior doesn't work. We know prohibition doesn't work, but yet people are still making laws. And why is it any different from making alcohol illegal or any substance illegal to mandating any other kind of behavior? That's not education. That's not the human buying in on their own volition. It's not people wearing seat belts or wearing helmets because they know and understand that it's usually the best way to go. There's some nuances there for all the motorcycle riders. um, but at the core, nothing on the, and I'm saying nothing on this planet wants to be domesticated. Things work on their own volition, and we can work with each other on our own volition. And there's lots of examples of traditional societies working with people's natural inclination. And we are all the same species, so we've got lots of commonalities. And you know, if we say if we say physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, most people are going to be more inclined towards one of those four facets. And to work with people's natural inclination is the key. And the understanding is the key. To work with our understanding, we're a species with the potential for objective thought process. And we've used objective thought process. We can do all kinds of amazing things with our intelligence if we use it. And yet here we are, stuck in colonial societies that want to mandate behavior instead of resonating with our core drive for understanding. So that's not an intelligent society. And proof's in the pudding, it doesn't work. Colonialism wants to mandate behavior for a species perfectly capable of understanding. Now, it's been going on for a while. This false narrative of mandating behavior has been perpetuated for a while, for a long while. Pre-colonization, pre-America. America's just another symptom of it. So when we're when we've got these ideas of mandating behavior in order to have a cohesive society, that's one of those things that we need to start rejecting and pushing out. Just like if we were to try and quit smoking, and you know, we feel that need for nicotine, and you just need to sit there with it. So all these things are so intertwined. In the addiction part, I think the lessons from addiction, and we did a workshop on that, is a really good place to look at all this and like understanding the addict, and to understand how to transmute anxiety. And if anybody's had any kind of bad behavior that they've ever wanted to quit, which I'm assuming everyone here has, or you probably wouldn't be here. We've gone through that. We've gone through that aspect of having to sit with ourselves and not fall into a compulsive reactive state, and consciously keep at bay whatever negativity that we'd been falling into subconsciously. And whether it's ideologies or nicotine, alcohol, junk food, printed currency, written law, clock time, whatever it is. But we've all been there. So if we know how to do that, then we know we're the best way to help somebody else understand that. And if we understand that anxiousness and really trying to make change, then we know that path. And the more we talk about it, the more we compare introspect, which I would submit is another core human habit and inclination. And I think maybe one of the most human things we can do is compare our inner journeys. And then we really see how similar we all are. And there's a lesson from contemporary community. From traditional communities is community. And we're not super quick to ostracize people. And one of the things I talk about in trade in the relationship building part is the traditional, reciprocal, authentic, directional, and empowering, right? So reciprocal, authentic, directional, empowering, quick overview, we can all understand where those are important aspects to healthy relationships. Well, the traditional part is pre overpopulation, when we were all smaller groups and less individuals. And with less individuals in smaller groups, each individual, the importance of the individual or the value of the individual stands out a lot more, right? There wasn't a swipe left or swipe right. If there's only 50 people in a group or 100 people in a group, that's a pretty small group, ultimately, especially when you talk about diversity of age ranges and genders and such. That's a pretty small group. And so if you didn't get along with someone, well, you kind of had to get along with someone. There was just more influence to understand each other. And I think that those are the points where we did understand, oh, well, this person's coming from, they're just more inclined to physical, or this person's more inclined to mental, or this person's more inclined to emotional or spiritual. And if we look at traditional societies, those were recognized in groups that were set kind of intentionally, well, very much intentionally recognized that here's a group that these people were more emotionally intelligent, and these people had more physical prowess, and these were the spiritual people, and these were the thinkers. And depending on whatever task we had, we'd go to those people. So it was really a community. And when we are individuals, that's when we fit together. And when we're our real selves, that's when we fit together, and when our values really mesh. And then that's when we get a cohesive society. But it does depend on the individual being nurtured and the individuality being recognized. Someone that's so with the individuality not being recognized, right? If we say colonial culture, anyone can be anything, all men created equal. I'll get back on that in a minute. Equal this, equal that, fairness. But also there's a big homogenization and domestication component in there, where looking at the education system specifically, everyone kind of gets the same food at the same time, the same day, at the same place. And so the individuality is not really nurtured. Our own inclinations aren't nurtured. And then we get this hodgepodge concept that anyone can be anything, and people just want to do a job that they make a lot of money at. And at that point, though, people are so far away from themselves, and society as a whole is so far away from themselves that there's not alignment. So, of course, people aren't happy. People are in jobs that they're not happy with predominantly. Of course, then again, they're chasing printed currency, inanimate object. There's a capitalism part of a focus on an inanimate object that doesn't have the capacity to reciprocate our energy and our efforts. Well, that's not going to be good. We look at that psychological aspect of attachment to an inanimate object. There's lots of lessons from addiction there too, right? If we don't have someone else to deal with, that's just another place to hide. And people that aren't interested, or that, I shouldn't say it like that, people that don't have good relationship with themselves, we could hypothesize that they're going to be more inclined to, yes, not have good relationships with other people, but also connect to inanimate objects that aren't going to give feedback on their character. And so again, big capitalism factor, big clock factor. There's just a time, that clock is not ebb and flow. It's not representing natural cycles. It's not representing natural life cycles. In colonial society, there's a lot of things that are inanimate objects that people are attached to. And the materialism aspect just exemplifies that. I mean, really, materialism is Western society, America, all that kind of thing. So yeah, there's a societal reflection of the individual narcissist. The narcissist doesn't have good relationship with himself, doesn't have a good relationship with other people, of course, doesn't have a good relationship with other life forms. So now, colonialism, America, it's an inanimate habitat. It's a false habitat. Is everyone familiar with the rats on heroin experiment? Rats in Disneyland? Yeah. So I see one. So the short version is this, and we've got, we're live streaming on Facebook too. But they did an experiment, I think in the 70s. They put a rat in a cage with a water bottle, and then a water bottle with heroin in it. And inevitably the rat goes, overdoses on heroin, just, time after time. And somebody, can't remember the person's name, I should though, because they deserve some credit. They said, yeah, well, the rat doesn't have anything else to do either. So what they did is they increased the diversity of his environment there. Not his or hers. I don't know what kind of rat it was. They increased the diversity of the rat's environment. And so they had all the rat playground, put some other rats on there. And then what happened is the rats only went over and took a hit off the heroin every so often and never overdosed on it. So, lessons from habitat. And again, Gabor Mate, who's helping me out a lot, whether he knows it or not, I'm sure he doesn't. That's one of the things he points to in his work with addiction. And he always says, if you're going to study an elephant, you wouldn't study it in a zoo. So we've got to look at our species in a natural habitat, how our species evolved for the, contemporary science says 300,000 years, our species, 3 million years, Homo genus. Without that understanding of habitat, we just don't have a foundation to look at anything. That's our lens. But that points back to what's going on in the mental habitat of those people that we call narcissists. What's going on in that mental habitat? And if everyone's grown up in colonial society, if everyone's grown up in the zoo, essentially, without all these natural challenges and without the understanding of natural human behavior also, of course, we're going to get more and more people that are going to be reflecting narcissistic behavior because that's the habitat. So now we're in this cycle of here's the habitat that's by default, and I say a construct because I don't think that anybody intentionally wants to be sick and flailing through life, but we are where we are now. And it's important to understand these factors, because if we're trying to get rid of the narcissist, right, or contemporary, if we're trying to undo narcissism, but we're still so hooked up to the rest of colonial systems, that's kind of taking us a step back for every step we make. We're just still spinning in that. So super important to understand the habitat that we're in our mental ecosystem, and what are the things we're relating to in our mental ecosystem. And if it's the pursuit of printed currency, obeying the law, getting to some place at a certain time, those don't work in our mental ecosystem. And I mean, they do not function in the true sense, and which of course is going to lead to dysfunction. And that's what we have. We have a dysfunctional society, hence its collapse. So everyone's running around like chickens with their heads cut off now. But it's been happening, every 4 years. Every 4 years since the inception of America, and before that. People say, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? What are we going to do? Looking in the mirror is the solution. Are there band-aids that we can use in the meantime? Should we say what needs to be said, when and where it needs to be said? Yeah, for sure. But it's always going to get back to our own personal development. There's no way around that. Understanding where I think that to say the narcissist, that's the part of it. So again, and again and again and again, right? It's a complex, well, I think it's really a simple conversation. There's just a lot to it. I think the concepts are easy to understand. It's just a lot to it. And then there's the battle of ourselves to be able to accept information and to implement information. So if we keep going over these things, and this is one reason why I wanted to do a series review, because I feel like we just kind of blazed through a whole lot. And I think there's a place to reflect on these aspects a little bit more, because it's critical. If we understand that there's naturally occurring challenges within us, and if we understand that the scarcity mindset part is that's the person that's afraid of, it's literally they're afraid of themselves. So they feel that insecurity and they ignore that feeling. Again, that's, I think, the first cognitive dissonance part. And yeah, if you can ignore yourself, then you can ignore anything. And then, welcome to narcissism, welcome to society at large. And we've all seen those aspects with individuals in our own personal experience and in society at large, and science denial and alternative facts and all that other kind of BS. Like, doesn't matter that people know now what's going on, because it's not that we don't have the information, it's that we're not using the information. But if someone's not engaging in their own personal development, if someone's not facing their own reality, then how are they going to face any reality that's presented to them from outside their own personal ecosystem? So that's creating understanding. And what we're doing now with these conversations is creating understanding. We're adding to our habitat of understanding around these human-centric issues. The more information we have, the more context we have, just like anything else. And the more we can see it in real life, and the more we can adapt to it, adjust to it, position ourselves in a place to field these things. If we understand that the narcissist, aka all these shitheads, are ignoring themselves, ignoring their core emotion, which when we feel something's wrong, when we feel something's not quite right with ourselves, when we feel even that we're not up to par, those are all just those natural indicators that, hey, look this way. You need to put some oil in. You need to check this. Check engines. It doesn't say anything's bad, just says check it. So we need to check ourselves. And if we understand on a bigger picture, we could say that that's the universe forcing us to look in. Just another mechanism of the universe encouraging us to look inward and develop ourselves. And how much autonomy is that? How much own volition is that? If we are engaged with our own personal development, that's a foundation for our real freedom, for our real sense of well-being. If we are the caretakers of our own natural ecosystem, that's powerful. That allows us to transcend all of these overlays from people that aren't taking care of their own inner ecosystem, right? And so, doesn't it make sense that the thinking people should be able to outthink the non-thinking people? If we talk a little bit about the finding optimism aspect in all this, I think that's a good component to understand about growth and exponential growth. And the more we have these conversations and the more we can see these things in ourselves and in others, we grow exponentially. We grow our understanding and we're able to speak to them more and we're able to point them out. Because the problem is not that we have shitheads in places of artificial power. And there's just so much there. You know, it's not real power, but in a sick society, that's what it's viewed as. It's not real leadership. They're not real leaders, but people in these positions of artificial power, people in these limelights of a celebrity-centric society, it's not those people, it's all the people around them that didn't have the aptitude, inclination, whatever, to thwart their efforts to get into positions to lord over other people. Classic examples of narcissism. Again, they don't want to do their own work, but they do want to tell other people what to do. Reflection, projection. You know, there's a point where our species can't just pawn off the concept of psychology on everybody that's got a licensed degree in that contemporary field, and we need to know some basic things about ourselves. People that want to be in positions of power are not the people that should be in positions of power. That's just something that people need to know about people. The narcissist interesting little dichotomy is that it would seem that the narcissist wants to manipulate people, right? That's the classic thing. It's manipulative. Well, to a degree. But when we say the narcissist wants to control other people, there's a conversation to be had there, because the narcissist doesn't want to work with themselves. And and so therefore, I'm going to submit that the narcissist really doesn't want to work with anybody else either, which is proofs in the pudding, right? But if they can maintain that authoritarian position and just keep everyone at bay, to say it in those terms, then they don't get questioned. And then that's when all the false narratives, the false bravado, the gaslighting, that's when all those factors come into play. And really, it's just to keep people from saying, hey, have you really thought about yourself? Right? Classic hallmarks of narcissism. If you have the emotional, how do you feel conversation, that's when things go south. And that's the biggest fear factor for people not doing their own personal development. Then they're not doing their personal development. Then when we're having conversations about emotional intelligence, in any group that has conversations about emotional intelligence, by the way, when you talk about people of different colors other than white, when you talk about LGBTQ plus, oh, I missed a T, LGBT, yeah, T. Okay, I got them in there. All those colors and flavors, those are all people that have different life experiences and that by default have had to do more emotional work. Introspect equals emotional work, not going with the contemporary narrative equals more emotional work and more emotional understanding. The people that don't fit in, the kids at school that were outcasts, are more emotionally developed people. They've had to spend time. They've had to be confident in themselves and say, hey, this is who I am, for whatever, and just have had to negotiate that. So again, understanding human habit. And so what I'm saying, the societal reflection is those people get targeted. It's not, I'm going to submit, it's not because of skin color or flavor preference. It's because of their emotional intelligence. It's because of their better understanding of humanity, because that's the threat. That's where the narcissist feels threatened, is when we're talking about humanity, when we're talking about personal development, when we're talking about emotional intelligence. That's where the narcissist gets threatened, because they haven't been doing their own. And then they're locked into that pattern of lies, that bravado. And then they have to keep up the bravado. And there they remain until we figure out how to start undoing some of that. And how to, maybe not undo the current demographic stuck in that position, but how to redirect incoming demographics, younger people, the next people in the limelight, if you would, the next people that, for better or worse, are having an opinion on the lives of others. The spiritual, I shouldn't say that, not spiritual leaders. That's a different, let me use something else. The priests, the police, the politicians, those people. I mean, those positions, you could say that all of those are narcissistic constructs, because they're all false ideas of power and maintaining a status quo and maintaining control, which is not nurturing. So kind of big blanket statement there, but that's my submission to the part of the conversation. The classic addiction, and I say that narcissism and addiction are just right there together, because the classic examples of addiction is filling the void. It's filling that interpersonal void with everything except for what goes there. And that's exactly what the narcissist is doing. They're not in tune with their own wellness and their own personal development. So typically they glom onto others that are more on that path. That's a classic, and I don't really care for the terms, but we're using them. But in the classic narcissist example, it's the narcissist empath. And so the empath is someone that's doing their work, that has the emotional intelligence, and the narcissist doesn't. But those two get together, and it's codependent because the empath's enabling it, which is, just because a lot of people haven't had this conversation, and then much less taken it in that context of addiction. Where are we enabling? If everyone who thinks they're an empath in a relationship with a narcissist, where are we enabling? That's a key component to contemporary society and our wellness here. And if we know addiction and addictive behavior, there's so many parallels that come through in that thing we call narcissism, and then the rest of it too. Misogyny, racism, colonialism, capitalism. Those are all reflections of addiction. And mostly they're addicted to a false narrative. They're addicted to ideologies. Because without the reality of what things are, how things work in a natural habitat, the quick fix mentality is to put something there, anything there. And that's the fear-based compulsive reactive. If I feel a void, it's just the apprehension of having a void in our energetic ecosystem, to put it that way, is where people start just filling the void, and filling the void with the first thing they can get their hands on, the first thing that makes them feel a little bit better. Instead of understanding real spirituality, let's make something up. Instead of understanding real human development, let's just say, don't do this, don't do that. But that's that lack of understanding. And so then if it's lack of understanding that's the problem, then our understanding is obviously the solution. To addiction, to maintain a false sense of comfort. And there's another word I'm trying to think of. But the classic addict, the classic narcissist, it's compensating for insecurity. And what do we do to maintain that false sense of security? With the drug addict and substance abuse, the classic, it's substance physically gives a consistent feeling, and a feeling of a false feeling of wellness when the medicines are abused. In the narcissist, it's the sense of power in the narcissistic mentality, in that it's the narcissist wants to paint the picture that they're beyond reproach. Because if someone paints the picture that they're beyond reproach, then they don't get questioned. And if they are just moving their community around so fast that there's not a chance to say, I think you've got some disconnects in your mental ecosystem going on. That's the modality of the narcissist. So if the narcissist can say misogyny better than this whole group, racism better than this whole group, and then of course the colonial governments better than that group. If the narcissist can maintain that position, that's their security blanket. That's the part where they are the addict and needing to maintain these false narratives to keep themselves to maintain the false narrative that they're telling themselves, to maintain that distance between the distance between themselves and themselves. If people are looking at external things and chasing ideologies or chasing materialism, they're not doing their personal development. If they can keep themselves in a position of hierarchy, then that's just one more layer that they can't have a face-to-face, reciprocal, interactive, healthy conversation with others. So if we understand some of these things, it gives us some more context in how to work with them. And I think that this carrying on these conversations between ourselves and people that are somehow on the opposite end of the spectrum from the cognitive dissonance demographic, then I think we can start to work with things like this a little bit better. And also the big thing is the narcissist in the mirror is make sure we're not perpetuating them, make sure we're understanding boundaries and not distancing ourselves, but keeping healthy distances and not perpetuating false ideologies, and encouraging productive conversations as opposed to hiding from challenges, and regrowing the social habitat to understand human habit and have some more of these conversations coming out in general public. Because I think that's a key also, is if people hear more conversations about these things, then I think that allows for more growth, more understanding. And, at the end of the day, with everything I talk about, I just always say that if after all the conversations, the only thing that happens is that we're encouraging more conversation that's outside of what a lot of people might be used to hearing, I think that that's a success. So we've been a little bit more than an hour so far. Is there any questions, any points that anyone wants to submit? I accept challenges also. Anyone?
I'll go.
Mm-hmm.
So
please, Isha, thank you.
We were talking about physical, mental, and emotional and spiritual, and you were talking about laws and the core drive of understanding in an intelligent society. And I kept in my notes putting down shame and the way shame interacts with those things. Like the laws are the attempt at an external control, where shame is the internal control, or would be in a society where we're working from the inside out with the introspection that you're talking about. And with it relates into how you were talking about being able to get along in smaller groups in the demographic, and you would have to get along with people, and shame being such a powerful emotion that constitutes belonging or not belonging. Like with enough shame and having that infraction that caused the shame happen enough times, a person could become outcast. But experiencing the shame, if you're being introspective about it, is also like an even more powerful marker than anxiety to participate in an adaptive system that creates that change and keeps you fitting in and keeps you belonging and keeps you in community. So I was just seeing how that related.
Yeah, I would say that when we talk about shame, that's a good observation there, because that shame part, if we talk about insecurity, I think that leads right into the shame part. And I think that in the aspect of narcissism, someone's insecure about themselves and they're not in a healthy environment, which, in the society at large right now, we can say it's not. I think that that's a huge influence on people to further not do their introspect and not work with their insecurity, because they're jumping ahead, translating their insecurity to shame. And I think that this is something that's really common, is people are jumping ahead so far instead of going through the process, and which relates directly to quick fix. When people feel that we're, behind the eight ball, when we're below par, that's when the processes that we need to get to par get shortcutted, and people start filling those voids with ideologies, materialism, that kind of thing, and not buckling down and taking the space that we need to sort through ourselves. So I think that shame in that part, and the not belonging, because if everyone has this false narrative, and I think this is going on too, if everyone has this false narrative of being okay and not having any internal challenges, and someone doesn't recognize that as bullshit, then they're going along with that ideology. And if they feel a little bit of anxiousness, then they're going to feel insecure, inferior, and then all the shame and the outcast and that kind of thing go along with it. So that's one aspect. And I think that shame as a that's just another mandating behavior thing that I think that people need to recognize, that there's no place for that in personal development and human development. And as a society, as a species, we need to know that shame, that's outdated, that comes from a uninformed mentality dealing with other people.
Either that, or it's how it's handled by the community or by the powers that be. And I think because it's not handled in an informed way, in a productive way, in a caring way, that it's also one of the things that spirals people, which is pretty much what you were just saying, into the addiction and being cut off, and into the void that then needs to be filled.
Yeah, if people are relating to shame if they've got that shame, inferiority, out the threat of being outcast, the threat of being looked at as less than, which of course that's the narcissist projection, is to put everybody else as less than, and the cast out and the cast the gaslighting part. I think that would indicate a connection to that aspect of shame.
Yeah. So, I mean, maybe a question too is like, how can shame actually be turned into something that is healthy? Like, I believe it's a natural response to a very severe action and that it has a place, but it's not handled correctly.
Um, I don't think shame has a place. I think that's a false overlay. I think that's a mistranslation, and based on well, it can be a mistranslation, but based on yeah, have people used shame as a tool? Yeah, but the people that would use shame as a tool is that's not the full understanding of
I
that.
don't mean from the outside, I mean as an introspection from the inside. Like it may exist. It's a natural human emotion.
Okay, so yeah, I don't think it is a natural human emotion. Shame's a colonial overlay because we don't have shame. We don't have that self. We don't have that.
Yeah. Can
Yeah.
I say I think it's from fear mongering also of this emotion symptom. If people fall into it, I think it's always fear based. Everything's fear based. I was only came to mind because today I was listening to a lot of scripture and I was opening up not to it, it just happened to be around me to help somebody else. And I don't want to be rude, but I was thinking the whole time, man, there's so much fear
Yeah.
into then make a person
Yeah.
feel shame and then their behavior change off the base of fear. And so
Right.
we don't have, yeah, right. We don't have that. If
Right. It's
to me, it's a
colonial.
symptom.
That's to me, that's colonialism. Shame, fear. That's looking at things from a colonial narrative, which of course a lot of people are going to have, because that's how, that's where we're at now. But MJ has a good differentiation here between shame and guilt. I think guilt is a naturally occurring emotion. I think that's a naturally occurring emotion. And then could shame be attached to that? And these are all good questions, and we're just kind of fielding them as we go. But when I think of shame, I just think, and in that term, we could say, oh, what are we actually talking about? We're using these words, and um, people people come from different places with different ideas about the words. But yeah, the difference between shame and guilt, because shame, I think in a healthy society and a healthy individual, there's not shame per se, but guilt, and pointing to that, I think has a place used in a mature manner. Um, I think that there's a place for that guilt to be recognized, and let's not do something that's going to make us feel guilty, because also the guilt, I look at that as an internal feeling that we relate to, and the shame, that's got to be relating to someone else. And so the core, we want to get back to what's the core of the individual, and how can the individual um, align with some of these concepts and grow their individuality, not based on external mandate behavior patterns or ideologies, but based on, like, really, hey, if you do something that's going to trespass on someone else, um, you're going to feel guilty, or you should feel guilty. And if someone doesn't, then that's a whole nother aspect. But I think that's the part that we're missing. And of course, if someone's not paying attention to their own moral compass, then how is someone else going to speak to that? How is someone else going to say, oh man, don't you feel bad because you're mean and greedy? But most people in that narcissistic negative cycles, they're ignoring their own self, and they've got layers and layers and layers of ignoring their own self in a society that's conducive to that. So to break through that, a little bit of a longer process. So we're, again, when we talk about Narcissist in the Mirror, let's make sure that we're not looking for quick fixes ourselves. And I think if I was to add another key aspect, another key philosophy is to just sit back and everybody just relax. There's not gonna be a get it, got it good sort of thing going on here. It's gonna be, when change happens, it's gonna be from our understanding of each other on a real core level, based on our own instinct, on our true understanding, not relative to any ideologies. MJ, did you want to chime in there on any of that?
I should probably own up to my own comment in the chat. So yeah, I would say shame is an experience of the eyes or being seen from outside. And guilt is something that comes from within when I know I've harmed someone. And shame actually is such a like a foundational piece of addiction that I'm not sure that it plays a healthy role in really much of anything. At least that's how I'm thinking of it, shame being placed upon me and guilt being something that I can own up to.
Yeah.
I wonder if oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to go in a different direction.
Oh yeah, go ahead. I think we went over that. I think that's good, but those are good. I mean, those things you can see where they're pretty close, and to sit back and say, okay, here are some of these things that are all close, and to just have good places to sort through these without shame or guilt. Sort through this conversation of shame and guilt without shame or guilt, without apprehension. And I know the people that I talk to person, it's like, okay, we're off the clock now. We're just, we got to be able to compare our concepts and our understandings freely without fear, and to know, hey, we're trying to figure out this. We're not gonna go the right way the first time. We're not gonna necessarily get it right the first time. There's huge understandings of just how we grow, and like there's the fail first, and we don't know something unless we first not know it. We got to have a blank space for life to happen. We have the Socrates, to be truly knowledgeable, we first must know that we know nothing. We have to start, and usually, of course, I relate everything to fishing. It's not uncommon where you have to go out and change lures a few times and go and figure things out before you really start connecting. And even if you think what's going on, there's still, and even if we have good pattern recognition in physical environments, physical external environments, or mental internal environments, there's still the process of actually doing it. And it's not just to sit back and, the words make sense kind of thing. We have to go through it. We have to go through our own experiments, in our own thought processes, in our own, the original version of the scientific method, and just pay attention. And oh, you know what, I was saying it this way and that didn't resonate quite with people, so now I'm going to say it this way, and I said it this way, and then I thought about it, and oh, you know what, actually there's a little bit of a nuance here, nuance there, and to really just relax into that and be able to have those deeper conversations about this. And so yeah, MJ, you were going to add something else too?
So you're referring to these various ways that society shows its dysfunction, right? Addiction, capitalism, social scarcity mindset, all that stuff. My thought is, so society is made up of tens of thousands of families, family systems. And when a human infant is born into a family system, its brain is 25% of what it's going to be as an adult. And by the age of 5, it's 90%. So those first years are so critical to what that child will develop into, and the security or some variation of that as insecurity, and how that will follow them through all of their relationships over time. And then into society, where we see all these things, playing out, as you're saying. And so I would, posit or speculate, or I just will say that I think it's my position that secure parenting, parents who are secure in themselves, so they have a sense of self, they know who they are, they are able then to create an environment where that tiny little brain, 25% brain, is able to become secure by the age of 3. So we can see that little 3-year-olds who know who they are, who are born into a circumstance like that, it's okay for them to be them. It's okay for everybody to be else to be who they are, and the differences are fine. And they don't have to change who they are, and they don't expect anyone to change for them. And we can do that by the age of 3 if we have an environment that is conducive to that. So how we can get to families and the parent structure, the leadership structure of families early on is a question of mine. And I wish I had the answer to that, but I don't.
Oh, I think you do. I mean, but also, if you don't, I'm going to boldly say that I do.
Okay, go
Self
for it.
out online here, because yeah, but still, family structures are made up of individuals. You know, and so who it's all going to get back to the individual. It's all going to be
For
get
sure.
back to the individual. There's, to say, oh, we're going to make a push to just, integrate families, but really lessons from addiction. The addict doesn't quit till they're ready. So how can we
Yeah.
get everybody ready? What, like individuals, and this is the thing, is like it's really super simple. The concept simple. It's individuality. And again, the concept is just keeping first how to get people ready. Well, during our conversation, we've all got platforms, we all talk to other people. If we're intentional about those conversations, it doesn't take much to add in a little hint here, a little hint there, a little hint there. And then sometimes you meet someone or multiple people that we can have some more in-depth conversations. And that's how things have to grow. It's not, we can't reverse engineer that. When that's the colonialism, is we can't reverse engineer and make a group of people more influence the individual more than the individual makes the group, because the group's composed of individuals. Society is a reflection of the individuals. And do they work together? Yes, absolutely. But at the very core, if we say, which came first, the chicken or the egg, it's got to be the individual. Because the
Yeah.
individual and the few individuals that are going to step up and say, look, this societal structure is not conducive to individuals, that's the starting point.
Well, so I'm sorry. Did I interrupt somebody? I guess not.
No, I mean, I could have said something.
Did I interrupt you?
But
Sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna reflect though, but you said, the habitat, and then that's when we're young like that, that's the energetic habitat that the young are picking up. So
Yeah.
there's no way to lie about that either. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
gotta be
And
real.
in
It's gotta be real. People can't do the
Yeah.
fake overlay, which again, welcome to America, welcome to colonialism. It's that fake overlay is just, we talk about ego in the aspects of the false self and the facade that people build to get through contemporary society. It's a stress response. And one could say that it's got real roots in survival. It's like the chameleon, but just changing the surface isn't a long-term situation. And then there's the addiction. Are medicines good on occasion? Yeah. But if it's just the focus on the medicine, if it's just the focus on the facade, then the core issues aren't addressed. So, MJ, you wanted to say something else there?
Coming back to that individual piece and the security, the individual security, fortunately, there are some folks who, when they have children, it's like a wake-up call. It's like, I need to give something different to this infant that I had myself. And then the introspection begins, right? And then other people don't at all. They just continue, they
Right.
do the same thing because it's all they know. And they don't really think about whether that's what a child actually needs to
Right.
develop that brain, in a way that child then can not need the law, because within them is their own law about, how to treat
Mhm.
someone. And yeah, so how, I mean, there's all kinds of ways that bring us to that rock bottom point where we want to turn around. We'll do anything to turn ourselves, around, or get ourselves turned around.
Yeah.
Um,
Key understanding.
Yeah.
Key
It's
understanding
usually,
of.
I mean,
Go ahead.
usually takes something extreme, like having a child,
Yeah.
or losing a child, or going through a divorce, or something like that is often like when life squeezes us, that we can't breathe. Then we're willing to go, okay, what's wrong with me?
Mhm.
What do I
Mhm.
need to do to have the kind of peace that I long for?
Yeah. 100% observation. When people hit rock bottom, then they're willing to change. And like, talking about the family systems is, maybe that's a place to do some marketing to the family. Hey, don't let your child be a reflection of you. And maybe that's a place to
One way to say
teach
it.
people that's a place to maybe offer people their own personal development and to go that. So yeah, where are places that people are more open to growth, and um those really powerful life moments are those places. I think in addiction, a lot of people, they're at better places to hear, but then of course there's so much to this, but then as people start to get better, they lose track of the path that they were on to get better. And I would submit that goes back to, habitat, and understand habitat, like natural habitat, and understanding natural environments and flow, and then the overlays in contemporary environments, aka colonialism, capitalism. Because we're all so intricately intertwined with those things that if we're really not keeping an eye out for them, it's just like addiction again. It's like, oh man, I was really trying, and then whoop, drank again, whoop, used again. And the capitalism, colonialism influences are just mimicking that exact, and when I say exact, I mean exact same modality as someone going through addiction. And that's why I say one of the key lessons from addiction is that if someone's gone through that and someone knows what I just said, you know what I said, because we've all been there. It's not that there's there's no alternative facts there. We know we're trying to quit, and then, man, whoops, I lost track for half a second and back to square one. Like, we know that. And that's exactly what is going on with, colonial ideologies, capitalism, and then also that's the narcissism too. That's the getting stuck in a narcissistic relationship. And I know it's bad and I'm trying to get out, but keep on getting back in again. So those things from addiction, to understanding the addiction components, really key, and to how to watch out for that in our environment is a huge, huge lesson. And the awareness that we need to watch out for toxicity coming into our environment is really not too present in contemporary society, because all the challenges are eliminated. All the natural challenges are eliminated. People don't know how to have that acute awareness, like looking for predators. And I've been fortunate. I've been fortunate enough to be in situations where I got to watch out for predators, literally, and when you're fishing in bear country and you want to keep paying attention. You're trying to catch fish and not get caught at the same time. And that acute awareness is, I think, what we need to grow and to get out of these traps, to get out of these addiction traps and these addiction cycles. So there's some real work to be done in contemporary society, because no one's used to that challenge of life or death. That challenge of life or death, that's there for a reason. And there's more lessons than just staying alive in our physical. And so, like, understanding life and natural life, not just in our physical, but I say that mirrors our mental, emotional, spiritual aspects too. And to be able to buckle down on that level and to be able to call on things, on extreme physical challenges, and draw that parallel in our mental, emotional, spiritual, is super, super important. And, lessons from traditional societies, that they implemented extreme physical challenges and would test us, still do test us in those aspects, so we can, draw on that deep inner strength. And most people just are so far away from that. Yeah, MJ, you got your hand up there?
Yeah, we, in our society and in Western culture, we have so much of our physical needs, cared for. We have everything that we need. And the coming back to what I said earlier in terms of family systems, what they're not providing is all the MES.
Yeah.
Right. And that is really where our needs are. And, where our lack is, those voids that we're trying to fill with this or that addiction, in Western culture. And I would guess that in, other cultures, it's, maybe different in the 2/3 world, perhaps. But, for here, it's the emotional parts of our brain that are not getting addressed and developed. And then later on, we see the effects of that in the society at large. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that somewhere along that, if there's a lesson, is that that's going to clearly show. And I will say, from my own personal firsthand experience, is that non-Western mentalities are the emotions, the emotional aspects, more present than in Americana. And that is a central thing. Yeah. Well, and just in average communication, yeah. The other cultures that I've been fortunate enough to rub elbows with are like the emotional parts first, actually.
Yeah. We are hungry for that, starving, desperate.
Yeah. But you know what you just said, and that thing about, people grow from inspiration or desperation. unfortunately, it's mostly desperation, and we want to try to, do some more inspiration. But if Western culture, gets to the point where it's just so bad that people get out of their beds and start to do the things that make change and demand what? To be heard emotionally, to there's like so many things there, but yeah, I mean, it is when we're in, but again, if we're in individual relationships, that's the boundaries. Like, don't make sure we're heard emotionally, right? And when people let people trespass, there's the enabling factor, which speaks
Yeah,
to,
the narcissistic empath pairing you said earlier
yeah,
happens so often,
yeah, yeah.
so often.
Yeah, but the empath's doing the same thing. They're making the
Absolutely.
excuses. They're making the excuses for not doing their work, which their work would
Absolutely.
be building
Mhm.
boundaries and modeling
Mhm. Yeah.
healthy relationships. So that's the thing. And we see it a whole lot where people make all the same excuses. Oh, I'm just trying to be nice. Well,
Mhm.
what's wrong with helping? Well, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. One addiction isn't better than
But
another.
right, right. So yeah, there's some good stuff there, some good understandings of human behavior as a whole and as a society. Yeah, thanks for that input there and that collab. Does let's see here. Now it's about a quarter till. Let's cut us off the Facebook now. I think that was good. That was good ending. Um, I think that'll be good. Kraig Smyth, MyBizGuide, Business of Being Human. This was a Friday Wellness Workshop, Narcissism EDU series overview. We just kind of went back through everything that we did in the last 7 workshops, and talked about how to integrate those in our own lives, and just to get another reflection. It's really important. I think that as much as I think the narcissism, maybe it's not the most accurate name, but it's a powerful tool, and people throw it around a lot. But if we really get to understand some of the concepts behind that, and where the scarcity mindset, narcissist in the mirror, addiction, misogyny, racism, colonialism, capitalism. So we're not chasing our tails on all those things. It all comes back to the individual, and our individual understanding is really the only chance we have at making things happen. So, no external management ideologies. So yeah, everyone for Facebook, thanks. And we'll get back into the after party with the Zoom group here, and have a good night and be well.